Has anyone been treated worse than Sarah Palin by the media in this country?
Gosh, I would really have to analyze and think about that. So I'm not prepared to answer that question on the spur of the moment. I really haven't, and I haven't studied that or looked at all the coverage about her, honestly.
You know, I remember watching some of the protests of the Gulf War in the later years of Bush 43 and seeing some of the signs, you know, the devil horns and the Hitler comments and things like that. And I remember going, wow, no one will ever be treated worse than this in American history. And a few months later, there was. So,
there are some, examples in my book. What I'm fond of doing is comparing. I call it substitution game. You take one scenario and see how people treated it, members of the media and so on, and you take a similar scenario or maybe a faux pas committed by somebody else of the opposing party, and you see how it was treated. And you can glean something when there's such illogical and disparate treatment of similar circumstances. And I know that Sarah Palin has been victim to some of that because I use some examples in the book where President Obama made very similar, faux pas or misstatements in some cases as other politicians or as Sarah Palin did. And yet in his instance, people, because they decided that probably they like him or didn't want to criticize him, were eager to accept that he just misspoke or he knew what he meant and everybody knew what he meant. But when Sarah Palin would say something or other public figures that they didn't like, sometimes that would be in the headlines and that would be, top news that was reported and parodied and taken very seriously by media and by some in the public. So I think the disparate treatment of these like circumstances are what's interesting to look at.
Not to be gloom and doom here, but a serious question for Sharyl Attkisson. Is journalism dead? I mean, is it naive to imagine ever returning to a time of fair coverage in this country where that's the majority of coverage, or is that ship long sailed?
I think that ship has sailed. It doesn't mean we won't be able to get great journalism. There's still some out there, and, my old network, CBS, still does some, of course, and it's still there to be found, but it's harder fought. There's a different goal in mind. There are a lot of commercial pressures. There's always been some. I've heard a lot of younger people. I'm now on the older end looking back, but I've heard a lot of younger people or older colleagues say that they've heard the same thing. Voice the opinion that there's nothing wrong with them as journalists giving their opinion or having an agenda in doing a story, and they still think that they can cover that story fairly. A la the Rolling Stone debacle when the author was trying to do a story about rape on campus but didn't even bother to reach out or interview the accused. A lot of people think that's okay, and I think that's the stunning thing. I recently judged some college journalism award entries for a prestigious organization, and the first 3 or 4 entries I looked at stunned me because they were discussing a controversy, and they literally had only one side of the controversy. They didn't even give a nod or a sentence or a line to the opposing view of the controversy. And I'm thinking, these kids must have editorial supervisors or professors in their classes, and has nobody told them you can't just do an advocacy piece if you're trying to do a journalism/news story? That's a whole different thing if you want to do advocacy reporting, but these were supposed to be fair pieces, and the idea that none of them had opposing viewpoints or even tried to describe the other side shocked me, but I think it's a comment on kind of where things are going and where things are being accepted to having gone.
And is the press allowed to do this, too, because of the consumer to some extent? Because, some people, they care about Kim Kardashian, but not so much about Benghazi if they even know what it is.
I don't agree with that. I think, yes, everybody wants to hear about Kim Kardashian, but there's a significant group out there that wants fair reporting as well and wants to hear about things like Benghazi. That's what confused me so much when my producer and I and other people at CBS and other networks would try to get stories on that we knew people cared a lot about and were very interested in. And when we couldn't get them on the broadcast, we thought, why are the managers making decisions that are actually contrary to news viewership, that would be bringing people something that they would watch, that they are clamoring for? A lot of times my pieces I would publish on CBSNews.com when I didn't think I could get them on the broadcast, and the Internet people were much better about getting a diverse group of stories on. And I was constantly told those stories got, major hits and were often the most widely viewed stories that we had online. So there's definitely interest out there. So anybody who says, well, people aren't interested in Benghazi, no, I think people are being made to think that by the propaganda out there and the propagandists who try to make that be old news and a story nobody cares about. People do care. It may not be 99% of the people, but we don't have to just pick one or two stories and not cover everything else. We can cover Kim Kardashian, but we can also, at the same time, there's room to cover Benghazi and serious investigative stories as well.
Great points. Well, Sharyl Attkisson, we appreciate everything you do. I mean, you've been at this for a while, and, we've followed your career. You just do a tremendous job. And other than your great book, Stonewalled, which I hope people will pick up if they haven't yet, what are you up to right now?
What I'm doing is just contributing to a variety of outlets. I've published more, in the past 9 months or so than the last couple of years at CBS News, both video, television, through various distributors, and print. So I try to cross-promote or cross-reference everything I publish on SharylAttkisson.com. If you're interested, you could go there. I've also done government watchdog pieces for Sinclair Media, which is seen, they own TV stations in many markets, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox affiliates, and they're seen by way more people than all the network newscasts combined. So it's been great to get some good stories out there into the market and into the hands of viewers, stories that I know they do care about, in a way that they're not getting skewed and kind of cut up and the meaning of them changed.
I remember watching you in college during the whole David Koresh situation, and I think I emailed you a few months back when they ran a documentary about that, and there you were. They showed one of the cuts of you, and you wrote back to me. You said, well, I have a lot different hair now, so.
How true.
So it's just amazing, It seems like just yesterday, but also a long time ago, and just an incredible career, Sharyl Attkisson. You've done it all, and you're doing some very important work right now, that's for sure. Your writing is tremendous, and we thank you so much for being on the Palin Update. We really appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me.
For more on Sharyl Attkisson, visit SharylAttkisson.com. It was a historic week in Washington as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Congress. Many Democrats did not show up to hear his remarks, even though Israel is clearly America's best friend. Sarah Palin wrote on social media, excellent speech by Prime Minister Netanyahu. She also provided links for a Sarah Pack I Stand With Bibi t-shirt for purchase and a link for Bristol Palin's blog that features the entire Netanyahu speech. You can access all of this on the Mama Grizzly Radio Facebook page. Remember when the media went bananas over Sarah Palin's emails and found absolutely nothing? And now, when there's a real email scandal, many in the press are quiet. Sarah Palin is taking notice, though, saying, quote, this Clinton email scandal can't be shrugged off. If this doesn't strike you as shady and corrupt, I don't know what will. Didn't anyone in the Obama administration notice that the Secretary of State for the most quote-unquote transparent administration in history was only using a private email account for all her government business? And her answer to all these questions is a tweet. Diplomacy and cover-ups by Twitter continues, unquote. And remember, folks, this is your Democrat frontrunner for 2016. A big pig suey for Arkansas. The Razorbacks lost a close one to LSU in basketball this past week, but the state scored a big victory when it comes to freedom. Arkansas said yes to Convention of States. Governor Palin and Bristol Palin encouraged this bold move, and the governor weighed in after, saying, quote, congratulations to the grassroots patriots of Arkansas, who scored a huge victory today. The Convention of States legislation passed thanks to the hard work of everyone who contacted their lawmakers at the last minute to turn things around. Folks, this is how we're going to take back our country and ultimately rein in our out-of-control federal government. Good work, Arkansas, unquote. To see any of the governor's posts in their entirety, visit Sarah Palin's Facebook page, follow her on Twitter at Sarah Palin USA, and visit SarahPalinChannel.com.